Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Fidelity Month and to this first Fidelity Month webinar of 2025, our third annual celebration. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Fidelity Month and to this first Fidelity Month webinar of 2000. If you'll excuse me, I think our Facebook live stream got overconnected there, if you may have heard. We'll keep going. Yes, as I was saying, this is the third annual Fidelity Month celebration, and this is our first webinar. For those of you who may not be familiar with what we're doing and why we're here, I'll give a couple minutes of explanation and then we'll go into our discussion tonight. Fidelity Month is a grassroots popular organization. We don't have a staff. We don't have a budget. We're just a group of friends contending for these ideals. It was founded by Professor Robert George of Princeton University in 2023. And it was inspired by some polling data that showed that Americans increasingly have little trust in some very important institutions, in faith in God, in religion, in marriage, in family, in our local communities, and indeed in patriotism, the importance of patriotism. Oddly enough, the importance of money had increased in Americans' minds over the past few years, but all those other ideals had declined in our priorities. Now we have to answer the question of why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because unlike many other nations, which are unified and are strong based on blood and soil, a shared faith, a shared ethnicity, it's different for America. We are founded in many ways, and our unity and strength is found in those ideals of faith in God, despite our theological differences, of the belief in marriage between a husband and a wife, of the traditional family, of the importance of those local communities, and of the importance of patriotism. So if those are gone, then sadly, America does not have unity and strength, and our country will come apart if we abandon them. We've seen that in many ways, that there are many trends reflecting that sadness of self-expression, expressive individualism. The CDC recently reported that about 20% of American adults struggle with anxiety issues, and it's closer to a quarter for young adults. But I think what we're aiming for with our webinar tonight is to show that we shouldn't just have despair. We shouldn't be reflexively tempted to that. There are great challenges when we're thinking about reaching younger generations with this message, but there's also reasons for great hope. And so today what we've done is we've gathered three men who have supported Fidelity Month, are familiar to us, but who are engaged actively on the ground in reaching the next generation with the message of fidelity. They're all involved in education and ministry, particularly campus ministry. And so I think they'll all bring a unique perspective. They're also from different religious traditions, from the Anglican Church as a Protestant tradition, from the Catholic Church, and from the Jewish faith. And so we'll have different perspectives, and I hope that'll be helpful for us. Let me introduce them briefly before we keep going. First will be Dr. Daniel Gullotta. Dr. Gullotta is an assistant professor at Ohio State University's Chase Center for Civics, Culture, and Society. He's beginning that role this coming year. He's a historian of religion, particularly interested in the history of North American Christianity and biblical interpretation. And he's also a deacon and currently in the ordination process in the Anglican Church in North America.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so glad to have you, Dr. Gullotta. Father Kevin Staley-Joyce, next, is the Catholic chaplain at Boston University. He has several degrees in theology. And prior to entering the priesthood, he was an assistant editor at a publication many of you will know, First Things magazine. And then finally, we have Rabbi Eitan Webb. Rabbi Webb co-founded the Chabad House at Princeton University in 2002, along with his wife, Jiti. He's been the Jewish chaplain at Princeton since 2007. He was recently appointed, we're going to congratulate him, to be a member of the Advisory Board of Religious Leaders to the White House Religious Liberty Commission. And he serves on the boards of Chabad on Campus International Foundation and the Sinai Scholars Society. We also, I want to give a special welcome to my co-host for this panel, someone many of you who are familiar with Fidelity Month will know, and that's Deacon Michael Forrest. Deacon Michael is a Catholic writer, speaker, and catechist. He's written for several Catholic periodicals with a focus on pro-life, cultural, and ecumenical issues. He resides in Massachusetts with his wife and has 4 children and 8 grandchildren. And until recently, he served as executive director of Fidelity Month in a volunteer capacity and did incredible work for our first 2 years building this movement. My name's Christopher Parr, and I've taken over Deacon Michael's work to a large extent to allow him to pursue other opportunities, but he's still with us and has been a great help to me. So the way we'll go first is we've asked each of our panelists to speak for a few minutes on what is the state of fidelity in Generation Z on their campuses and in their own religious traditions. And then afterwards, Deacon Michael and I will have some questions, some thoughts, and then we can have questions from you. So please feel free to go ahead right now, start putting your questions in the Q&A box below, and we'll look forward to answering some of them. But first, Dr. Gullotta, please feel free to go ahead.
Christopher, why don't we
start
with the Fidelity Month prayer? Yeah.
Yes, I have forgotten that. We are definitely glad to have Deacon Michael lead us first in the Fidelity Month prayer that he was instrumental in writing 2 years ago. So Deacon Michael, please let's go ahead and pray.
Yeah, I would just invite everybody to join in. It's an ecumenical prayer. It should feel comfortable and familiar to everybody. But if there's something that you're not comfortable with, substitute something that you are. So please feel free to join in with us. Almighty and merciful Lord, we praise you and thank you for all you have given us and your great and unmerited generosity. Please help us to remember who we are and whose we are. Grant us the grace to unite as one people in turning back to you with all of our hearts, with all of our souls, and with all of our minds. Cleanse us of all that separates us from you, and help us to cultivate the virtues we need this day and always, so that we may grow in fidelity to you, who are always faithful, and to our spouses and families, and to our communities and countries, and thereby live in accordance with your holy will. In your boundless mercy and loving kindness, Lord, please heal and restore our land. Amen.
Amen. Dr. Gullotta, please feel free to go ahead.
Well, first, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me. This has been a preoccupation of mine for quite some time, as anybody who's been following me on social media with articles I've been sharing, but also articles I've been writing about what's up with the kids these days when it comes to religion in America. There's a few observations that I think are worth pausing to look at. There are things that I think many of us in this panel, but also perhaps watching, can be happy about, which I'm happy to talk about. But of course, there are also things that I think we need to be cautiously optimistic about and not rest on our laurels. One of the things that's most interesting to me, the polling that has just come out from Gallup and Pew, that religious decline, particularly amongst Christians, has stagnated finally. It's actually finally reached a stopping point, at least. So now, again, some people overread that with "we're back, baby," as the memes go. But having said that, though, it is, I think, an encouraging sign to see that there is some kind of stagnation going, that at least the tide of over-secularization, the rise of the nuns, although it continues, is still, holding back a little bit. So the million-dollar question is like, why? What's going on here? And then to our friends, brothers and sisters and colleagues in the United Kingdom, the most recent report that's come out has dubbed something called the Quiet Revival, where previous revivals of Christianity were far more focused on flashy crusades like Billy Graham and huge tent meetings. Something much quieter is going on in the UK, where people are going to churches for the first time, buying Bibles for the first time, listening to podcasts that they would have never listened to, watching YouTube channels, etc., etc. I was just at Oxford myself on a fellowship researching for my second book on witchcraft in America. And I must say, I know this is anecdotal, but it shocked me how many young people were with me every morning or evening during morning prayer or evensong. and how young they were. It was really quite something to behold. Again, I know that was anecdotal, but as somebody who's now over 35 years old, I do remember a time where there'd be no young people when I would enter a chapel like this, or at a place like Oxford, they would be purely tourists. So it's like really interesting to behold. So this raises questions about what's going on. And of course, different philosophers and sociologists are wondering what might be explaining. But really, I think one of the things that I'm most compelled by, and I think there are many reasons, I am an historian, I don't believe in monocausal explanations, but I think one explanation has been that postmodernism as a truth claim has sort of run its course. Partly because it was never really too stable to begin with. And beyond that, I think people want more, that there has been a quest for more that young people have been lacking. Politics, for as fun and energizing as it can only take you so far. All these different ideologies, for as meaning making as they can be, again, they can only take you so far. I think it's particularly interesting the data we have about young men in particular, young men who are finding their way into churches as well. And a lot of people are wondering why that is and why that's so interesting. Well, speaking as an historian, since the days of the Puritans, women in America have always been higher significant numbers of full-fledged church membership. And even in the 70s and 80s, when intensity data, like who did Bible studies more often? It was women. Who volunteered at churches more often? It was women. You know, you name it. Now we're starting to see those numbers shift, where men are far more likely to be engaged, motivated, and energized. Now, of course, this is all very recent data, and one of the things that I'm trying to talk to my brother clerics about, and also colleagues who are interested, is that is this a moment or a movement, as the age-old question goes? Is this here to stay, or is this actually just going to be a passing trend, like all the other, so much of social media with Gen Z kind of gets consumed and then forgotten? I don't know. That's a big question. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But I do think some of these trends we're seeing, the anecdotes I've observed, and just some of the things I've been invited to expand upon as a professor and a minister, I think exciting. I don't want to ramble too much. I'm more happy to take questions to talk about this stuff. But I think there's a lot of interesting data out there to unpack, and there's a lot of promising signs to point to.
Thank you, Dr. Gullotta. That's really interesting. Father Kevin, you go next.
Thanks very much, and great to see you all, and thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. So I've been fortunate to be a college chaplain for just about 5 years now. We started during the kind of crazy, chaotic period of COVID, all the strangeness and alienation that took place during that time. And we really had to rebuild things since then. This past year was extraordinary because after a few years of building up, we saw about a 90% increase in our mass attendance starting in September, this past September. And it was not our doing, it was the work of God and the students and their response to God, we could say. But it was also seen by other colleges around town, colleagues at Harvard, MIT, Tufts, Boston College. We actually have 64 colleges in the Boston area, total saturation. But they reported similar phenomena, real upticks and almost doubling, maybe a nearly doubling of mass attendance on Sundays. And also things like our small groups and Bible studies and people who come to talks, that kind of thing. But mostly, worship being the primary thing that we see an increase in. And those numbers get even bigger when you look at some Midwestern universities, some larger universities in Texas and elsewhere. Also, people who are entering the church just because it's local. Past few years, Harvard has had the great notoriety of having between 30 and 50 new Catholics every year from among grad students and undergrads. And the same is true at many other colleges on different scales. But it just signals that something is going on. Those are not end of the world numbers. Those are not enough numbers to fix our problems, right? But it's a signal. It's a signal that something is afoot. So on our campus, we have a Catholic center, which is in our case, a brownstone. We're very fortunate to have it. And so it's very mom and pop in the way we structure it. It's just myself and then 2 part-time employees and then 4 missionaries from a great organization called Focus. Focus was modeled on Campus Crusade for Christ, which has now been rebranded or renamed as a Crew. But Focus, they have their own, of course, way of doing things, and they help us out in a big way. But so the pastor in our little, that's me in this small campus center, ends up being the pastoral counselor and the one who says mass, of course, and the pastor, and then also the janitor and the dishwasher and the maintenance guy and the development director, I suppose. So there's a kind of a family environment for that reason, because we're all responsible, and it's very kind of non-corporate in that way. And there's a family-like feel in our building. People kind of come in and they'll say, this feels very cozy, and it feels like these people are kind of meant to be here. And then, of course, the struggle is always to make sure that we're always bringing new people in as well and not having it be a club. So it's that constant balance. But I've noticed with this Copper students, they, as regards religious faith, they really want their ministers or priests or pastors to be good pastors. They have a deep desire for them to do well what it is that they do. And they also have a sense of, okay, you're in your lane, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. And they have very few anxieties of the kind that I saw in my past parishes, relating to questions like structure and authority in themselves. They're not really worried about that in the same way as my parishioners in other parishes who may have been on average maybe between 40 and 60 might have anxieties, which again are understandable. There's a reason for those things. There's a reason for suspicions and fears and concerns. Can I really trust this? Of course, those are reasonable things to talk through. But with this group of students, they know that I, being about 15 years older than they are kind of closer in age than we are, either one of us, to the baby boomer generation. So there's a sort of kinship there. And they also know that, recent history is different from slightly more than recent history. And there are kind of generational epochs that unfold. We've been fortunate to see an unending stream of marriages of students who are 22, 23, 24, who want to get married without delay. We're so thrilled to see that. And I'm constantly on the road for these marriages. Many other religious vocations, priests and religious sisters, a dozen or so in the past several years. So Gen Z, they alternately give me hope for the future and then also nightmares for the future. And that's the case with every generation. No generation is going to cure the problems of any other generation, but each one has their own particular foibles and also strengths. So I came to college ministry, I think myself being quite idealistic, thinking, I love a good debate. I love the thrill of charitable confrontation with challenging ideas. And I'm often finding myself actually begging students, please, ask more challenging questions. I really, really enjoy the hard questions. And they kind of are actually more of the mind of, no, we kind of already are on the same page. We prefer not to rock the boat that much. And they are actually maybe even more idealistic than I was coming in. They care about ideas. They get riled up about ideas. And also they're very easily wounded by challenging ideas. So it's both and. There's no one who cares more about having the right ideas and having those ideas kind of get into your personality to make you who you are at your identity level. And also a little bit of maybe what Jonathan Haidt has spoken about with fragility, although I do see that kind of waning. I don't think it's maybe as bad as it was 5 years ago. Now, there are some things that still surprise me and shock me, although again, they're not always there. A shocking number of, let's say, 22-year-olds have their locations tracked by their parents on their smartphones at all times. So I graduated college 2009. We had a great college chaplaincy at Princeton. Rabbi Webb was there. Amazing ministry on both sides. That was unthinkable. It also was technologically not possible, but it was unthinkable. So a little bit of what Jonathan Haidt might have talked about the hovering parental generation. Not so much the helicopter parent, but the concierge parent, who is kind of in that role, and totally understandable. It's like you've spent your whole life working up to protecting, safeguarding, guiding your child. And it's just the most natural thing in the world to have that little struggle for a couple of years. Do I let them go? To what extent do I let them go? But they're being sort of held on an electronic leash until they leave in some cases. Occasionally be a student who gets a phone call and they'll say, well, my parents calling me, asking me why I'm lingering so long at the Catholic Center after Mass is over, because I have to get somewhere for some event or whatever. And again, this is unthinkable. I've never, I checked in with my family every so often during college, but it wasn't anything like that. The same thing might also occur with, and it does with our many couples getting married. Many parents, again, totally understandably, it's not a mark against them per se. They will encourage them with great intensity to delay their marriages by 5 or 10 years. And it's a real struggle for students to have a little bit of a sense of autonomy. I actually can make this decision, and I've gotten here through a course of reasonable, fair-minded decisions. I'm not doing something impulsive. And so I can lovingly approach my parents and say, I know you're not ready, but as it happens, chronological aging itself doesn't actually make you more ready. You're going to get ready when you need to get ready. That could be now. It could be 5 years from now. It could be 20 years from now. But life is passing us by, so we're going to go ahead. That's a very frequent conversation. Another thing just about Generation Z and their idealism, which I think is both a really good thing and also, challenged in certain ways. They're the most self-disclosing group I've ever met. Surely, due in part to growing up on the internet. The internet is just one giant, boundary issue. And it means, on the one hand, the very good thing that they're willing to talk things out. They want to talk about everything, the granular small thing to the huge thing. And curiously, I noticed this goes both for men and women. This is maybe the most surprising feature of that. Both men and women in more or less equal numbers want to talk about everything and talk everything out logically, think it through. So bracketing the question of whether it's always a good idea to talk about everything, because sometimes you can give life or add fuel to anxieties. But that's an observation. These kids also, they drink alcohol at a shockingly low rate compared to 15, 20 years ago, for sure. And they also are very conservative with regards to their relationships. A frequent conversation is, hey, do you think it's too risky for me to go on one date with this person? And of course, the answer is no, you should definitely go on one date. You should be fine. You'll be fine. Unless it's a terrible situation, in which case you shouldn't. But those kinds of needing permission for small risks is something that it's a signal of their risk-averse nature as a generation. Surely reacting in part to a lot of divorces among their parents, other factors in that category. Many of them will speak very, very openly about mental illness and the kind of even announcing it to groups of people. Oh yeah, I struggle with depression. Or I ended this class because it was not good for my mental health. Or I had a disagreement with the professor, and instead of confronting the professor, I decided to withdraw from the class at cost to me, because the cost of confronting the professor to me was a greater psychic cost than having to do a summer course to make up for my lost credit. A shocking number of them, although I'm not convinced it's drastically more, a shocking number of them know friends who sadly have brought about an end to their own life through suicide. Maybe in high school, maybe before, but a significant number. A fellow priest talking at a conference last year, he was saying, we always get down on Generation Z and say, oh gosh, you're struggling with mental illness so severely. And that may be the case in many ways, but it's also that I think these students are reacting to an insane world in the way that anyone might be expected to react. And in a world that is alienating, it makes sense that they are alienated. It'd almost be strange if they weren't alienated by the world in many ways. So hence the risk aversion, the fear of failure, the bristling at challenging ideas, although also caring about the truth and ideas, and being true believers, and in many cases being very, very brave. So just one kind of closing thought. I think Generation Z, as some recent experience shows, they care deeply about the transcendent. They're showing up in a way that maybe they weren't before. They're also challenged by the desire to numb their reaction to the world. That's why the drugs of choice today are not things that kind of give you energy to do, math problems. They're things that put you back to sleep. So bad content on the internet, video game compulsions, marijuana, all these things are drugs that put you down and don't bring you to some kind of elevated state, let's say. Not that that would also be good, but that's the choice. That's the directional choice that they have implicitly at least made. And so I'd say that they're doing things in very much the opposite way that the baby boomer generation did. If I can generalize and say that baby boomers first went out to experience and experiment and then kind of reap the consequences, see what happens, then reflect on the experience. I would say Gen Z is doing the inverse. It's reflecting first at great length and then cautiously, hesitatingly experiencing as the secondary bit. So my general approach then is to say I want Gen Z students to not be alienated and just keep the things that they have that are good. It's good that they care about reflection. It's good that they're being fairly cautious in things that could lead to heartbreak or self-destruction or delay in important decisions in their life. And so a big part of their identity, as they find it, is I think just realizing that their identity is simply in being creatures who are made in the image of a divine creator, and that their identity can be found too in their destiny for union with God. So it's okay to be restless, as Augustine would say, as long as we know why we're restless, and that nothing on earth will give us rest, but only the transcendent.
Thank you for that word, Father Kevin. Rabbi Webb, we'll hear from you next.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, Kevin. It's good to see you after 10 years or so.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we worked together way back when, and it's nice to be back on the chat together with you. It's actually it's a little funny for me to be on this discussion and even to be in the role that I play, because as I emailed to Chris earlier, I am the furthest thing from a statistician. I am a practitioner. I don't look at the numbers. I don't look at the data. People ask me how many Jewish students are at Princeton. I actually don't even know the answer because it doesn't concern me. I know there are enough to keep me busy for the entire year and then some. So that's my bailiwick, and I take it joyfully as a gift from God. I find that statistics are useful in applications for funding. They're useful in sort of large studies, and people want to understand trends. But in a group of friends, and I think we are in a group of friends, I think it's okay to dispense a little bit with the statistics and say that whatever God has provided to me, that is my work. And it could be a little, it could be a lot. It doesn't really matter. And similarly to the question of right wing or left wing, we have hundreds of students that come through here, and they're across the spectrum politically. And people ask me, so, how do the people who are politically more conservative or politically more liberal react to certain things? And there too, I mostly don't know because I don't ask. I feel that if a person comes into my home and to my ministry, and I have 10 minutes with them, that's 600 seconds to change their life. And anything other than the focus on that is just a total waste of time. So that's kind of how I approach it. I think that the outcomes may validate the approach. We've been here for 22 years, and we have more than 4,000 alumni that we are in touch with. We have 11 weddings in the next 3 weeks that I will be working on. So it's beautiful, and it's wonderful. But I'll just mention in 1990, so 35 years ago, there was a fellow by the name of Lawrence Kellerman who wrote a book called Permission to Believe. Now, the book itself is interesting. 4 arguments for how a person might be able to logic their way into believing that there's a God. He's a Harvard graduate back when that was still relevant. But the title, I think, is more interesting than the book. And the title always struck me. And I've thought a long time about this idea, and I use it very much in my work. And as Kevin said, this generation is different. They do drink less, they do think more, they overthink in a very, very, very intense way. They're more cautious, they're more thoughtful, and they're open. They're very open to conversations about faith, the conversations about God, the conversations about belief, and the but is very big. They need to be given permission to do that. And there's a great sage 500 years ago, a Jewish rabbi, who said that there is a notion called my God, and there's a notion called my Father's God. And the difference between them, as it says in Exodus, right? This is the Lord, and I will adorn him, the God of my father, and I will adore him. And he says the difference between these two is that my father's God is what was imposed on me. And I do it. I do it because I was told to do it. In our faith, that means I may have gone to synagogue, I may keep kosher, I may keep Shabbat, I may do Passover, may whatever. But it's unclear what is retained by me, what is truly, my act, and what is, something that I'm doing because others are kind of making it happen. And when people come to the college campus, there is a transition, a very, very strong transition that goes from my Father's God to my God. And if there's one teaching that I say to my students, and I've said this hundreds, maybe thousands of times, is that it's reasonable to expect that in the transition from my Father's God to my God, that there will be a dip. It would make sense. You'd almost have to have that because you're going from doing things that someone else told you to figuring out what you yourself do. But what I say to the students is they should not fear the dip. The dip is okay because it's part of the learning process. It's part of the growing process. It's part of them moving into what I would say is a deeper level of faith, a faith which is coming from their own understanding, from their own experience, from their own studies, from their own learning. And that is going to be far more enduring than it was prior. So I think that there's a lot of hope. I think there's a lot of hope for this generation. I think that without throwing too much shade at certain groups, those people who are wringing their hands and saying, "Henny penny, the sky is falling," might do well to look at themselves and say, maybe you're bad at advertisement. Because there's two ways to deal with a failing business. One is to say that the business model is bad, and one is to say, well, maybe we should get Madison Avenue in here and figure out why we're marketing this wrong. And so I think there are two approaches, and we're at a crossroads now where there are some people who are saying, oh, the American people, American youth have checked out on religion, and it's not true. As Dr. Gullotta said, it's certainly not true, and the data doesn't even bear that up. It's, as you said, it's evening out, perhaps slightly going up. But more than that, it's hard to look at yourself and say, maybe I am not presenting this well. It's much easier to say the recipient has no interest. But we know as people of faith that is not the right approach. The right approach is to look at everyone else and to see them with grace and to see them with mercy and to see them as literally a creation of God, imago Dei, a person who has God pulsating through them, and obviously is able to be reached. It's impossible that God would create something that cannot be reached. That's nonsense. And so the only answer is, well, maybe I need to take a good look at myself, and maybe I'm overselling, or maybe I'm underselling, or maybe I'm just not doing it in the right way, or maybe I need to go and take a step back and pray to God and say, God, I'm here for you. Grant me the wisdom and grant me the words so that your ideas should be able to carry through me toward this other person. But to say that that can't work, to me, is a rejection of God. So I don't know if that's heretical in this group, but that's my thought.
Thank you, Rabbi Webb. That was very good. I would agree. I have some questions for you all, but first I will let Deacon Michael speak if he has any further reflections on what you all have said, thoughts of his own, and then we'll go to some further questions.
Sure. I want to thank you all for some wonderful reflections on Gen Z. They were very thought-provoking, and my mind was racing, as you can imagine. I was trying as hard as I could to write down notes and hope I didn't miss anything important. But as I was listening to you, I was thinking, of course, in terms of Fidelity Month. The aim of Fidelity Month is to unite us together as a people by striving toward a higher bar, towards coming together on the agreement, the agreement on the importance of God, fidelity to our spouses and country, and into our communities. You're trying to be for something rather than against it. As Dr. George used to say, we'd rather light a candle than curse the darkness. And it sounds to me, what things that you were describing, there were many aspects that Gen Z should find some aspects of Fidelity Month very appealing. And so I would like to kind of examine those things, go through a few questions, some things that you raised that made me immediately think, how do we, what would naturally be appealing about Fidelity Month to Gen Z? And how can we craft Fidelity Month to make sure that we don't miss opportunities to speak to these people who have their own unique characteristics? For instance, Dr. Gullotta, you said something that really stuck with me, and that was, you were talking about some ideas that made me think about their interest in truth and versus power today. Especially, I'm thinking of DEI, which is all about the oppressor versus the oppressed. This impulse that they have towards justice and injustice. How can we perhaps, how does Fidelity Month maybe help them to focus that in a different sort of way to help them to express these good impulses?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I think Father Kevin's point as well, what he was saying about the curiosity and the openness as well. I think that's been true in my own experience in the church and in the classroom. Um, to your question about these impulses, I think often while it's a bit of a cliche, cliches have their rooting in some kind of truth. The golden rule that unites most of the world's great religious traditions do have these ethical standards about how one treats oneself, how one treats one's neighbor, and how one treats one's deity. So obviously, the interest in justice, in mercy, in charity, in good works, in hospitality that we're seeing. That I think often, this is where Tom Holland would say, the historian would say, a lot of that has its basis in Judeo-Christian things to begin with. And the debate now is the roots and the fruits. But I think that some Gen Z are not just satisfied with the fruits. They want the roots. They want to go deeper to how, I'm totally open to helping the widow, the orphan, and the outcast, in the words of the prophets. But why am I interested in helping the widow, the orphan? So maybe there's an Imago Dei thing, as Rabbi Webb talked about. Maybe there's something where, look, there's just the government can do something, but my local synagogue, my local church, my local temple, you name it, like we can actually do something beyond what Uncle Sam is offering, and beyond that as well, to get eschatological, apocalyptic in the truest sense of the world. Like what happens to the unjust actions at the end of the day? Are we simply at the mercy of different political schemes that will solve something one day but not everything, where people in more religious traditions, like many of our own, would say, actually, there is a day of judgment, there is something to look forward to, where the lion and the lamb will lay together, that tears will be wiped away, that wounds will be bandaged. So yeah, like, I know that's a bit of a scatterbrained thoughts, but to me, I'm not surprised that there's interest, and I think there are things that we can think. My big thing that I would say is there's a localism that we can provide on the campus, in our local religious communities, and of course in our family elements. Just to give one anecdote before I end, one of the things I quite like, I'm quite interested in a little bit of family finances, is one of the things I really like that Dave Ramsey, financial guru, something that he taught his kids as they were doing chores, is when he gave them the money after their chores were done, he would withhold some of the money to then instruct them, you have to give this to a charity of your choice. You can pick the charity, you can pick but you don't own, even though you worked really hard for this, you don't own all of it. You have to give some of it to other people. And speaking as a parent, I think there's little things like that, maybe, that, as simple as it is. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I would love to hear some more from Father Kevin and Rabbi Webb on this too. This idea that is it possible that what could most speak to this generation is an appeal to, it makes me think of immediately, of course, I think of the Serenity Prayer. The Serenity Prayer is all about differentiating between what is in your power and what is in your control and what is not. That there's so much that's swirling about them that's beyond their control. So many things now when it comes to politics are all about kind of global, large scale things that I would imagine to young people would seem overwhelming. Like, what can I do about this? This is all beyond my control. And maybe Fidelity Month is kind of like in Catholic theology, I don't know if in every theology has this idea, but there's an idea called subsidiarity, which is that you should handle things at the most local level possible and only kick it up the ladder when necessary, and not so as to destroy the lower level. So maybe on some level, we can empower this generation to see, hey, here are the things that you can do to organize, to reach out, to get excited and motivated. Does that make sense? Does that speak to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one thing would be the source of information. I noticed that not a single one of these students watch TV or own a TV. They don't consume the kinds of media their parents do at all. They don't sit down in front of the TV and kind of have their blood boiled by a certain packaged presentation of how bad things were today. And you wouldn't believe the 20 worst things that happened today. We'll package them for you for the evening news. So they've moved past the saturation point, and they've just kind of retreated into niches. And that can be good because it's a reaction against oversaturation, but it can also lead to some oddities, like reviving old ideas that are bad ideas that they shouldn't be reviving, that just kind of happen on strange corners of the internet. So I think the big question is, how can they not get overwhelmed by the interconnectedness of the world, which is just this enormous, overwhelming background theme that we all have to deal with, and also get motivated. One strange phenomenon I would observe a couple of years ago, I just gave a little for Verino at the end of graduation. And it was the year of the writer's strike, which I'm convinced that most of the students had just found out about 2 or 3 weeks previous. It was not some longstanding grievance that any of them really had. But a number of them were yelling invective for like a good half hour straight during the speaker's speech. And so I was on stage, so I was like listening to every single pregnant pause. People would just jump in with opprobrium. And it was incredible. And I kind of wanted to say to them, like, guys, this is your one and only graduation. Are you sure you want to have this be the way that you're, comporting yourselves? But they were dead set on that. And maybe they'll look back and say, oh, that was unwise. But there are these spurts of inspiration and enthusiasm. And I think a big part of it is taking that and kind of channeling it into something that's really, really productive. Because I think there's a performative dimension, which, we all do that when we're younger. But moving that into something truly, truly productive, kind of like channeling that energy toward the good. They certainly have a lot of it. And I agree with what Rabbi Webb said. There's this dynamic where we can never push them over the finish line. They have to do that themselves, because otherwise they'll hate us 10 years from now, and they'll say, that darn chaplain just, he told me what to do. But we can reason with them and then say, all right, it's now up to you. You must be the one who walks across the finish line. Only you can do that. It'd be wrong for anyone else to try to compel your will. The will is not the kind of thing that can be compelled anyway. But I think, channeling is going to be key for them as they get older. And then also a little bit of confidence in decision-making and discernment, capitalizing on that good skill they have of thinking or even overthinking and saying, well, I'll at least deploy this to its greatest end, which is, carefully considered choices.
So offering to them some of the opportunities that are in front of them in regard to Fidelity Month, trying to make it their own, inviting them in rather than it seeming as something that's forced on them, should be appealing to Gen Z to say, look, you can own this and make this your own. And we're inviting you in. It's not a top down. There's not some huge, this is a volunteer organization. We're inviting everybody in. However this gets manifested where you are, that can be just as valid in your way as another way. However it is that speaks to you is what we want you to do, what we want you to draw from it. So would you agree that should be something that's appealing to Gen Z, this kind of invitation approach? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, certainly a huge part of it is the invitation. I mean, the thing is, an invitation is also a kind of giving permission. I think Rabbi Webb, you said the same thing. Giving permission is sometimes we have to give ourselves permission. Can I actually give myself permission to dive into this assignment so I can actually get it done rather than, wasting 4 days thinking about it. So yeah, an invitation is giving permission. And I would say I want to see them, continue to not need permission to be given for everything. But certainly at a certain stage, they do need it. And, it can be an important role to let them know that you do have that implicit permission to do what's good.
There were 3 other things that caught my attention from you, Father Kevin. The first was that you mentioned their interest in family. And this to me really caught my attention because, of course, Fidelity Month is about, faithfulness to God, faithfulness to family, and faithfulness to your community and country. And so this idea of family, in my experience, one of the things that I'm concerned most with is a kind of cynicism that has gotten into some of the young people, that they almost see having a child as destructive to the environment, that they're afraid to have children. That, I hear often people will say, I don't want to bring a child into this, that would be irresponsible. And you're saying that you see a kind of a hope and an interest in the family and getting married and doing that. I find that very hopeful. Is that correct?
I think so. And basically, they're programmed a certain way, and they'll deliver that programmed line to you the very first time they meet you. But it takes almost no effort to deprogram them from that falsehood, I think. Like the idea that the cost-benefit relationship would indicate to you should never have a child in today's world. As if, 500 years ago, it was like really, really great, amazing place to, it was incredibly, torturous existence in certain parts of the world and still is today. And to look at the world that the way it is in America and say, never, I could never do this. So the one, our center has become sort of a free inquiry domain because we don't have, like a Abigail Adams or Witherspoon Institute on our campus. So we it ends up being a place where people can actually have free discussions, and that leads to people talking about these things. The one phrase though we ban is the phrase informally. We ban it is the phrase someday. When we're talking about our lives, we don't want to hear people say, I'll do that someday, because it just sort of sounds like it's aspirational and it's something I don't really want to do. And just kind of like in a joking way saying like, oh, we don't use, let's not think of in terms of someday, like I'll have kids someday. Because that's kind of like just saying never. Anyway, once they get beyond that barrier, then there's an openness to it. And I would just say, I think they see the inadequacy of these social theories. I think a lot of them have come to me with their syllabi, for instance, and they'll present like maybe like Marxist social theory that they're taught, and they'll say like this doesn't really seem like an adequate account of the human person. Is that right? And then we'll have a great discussion. Or not to get into the weeds, but like the consent only based vision of relationships ethics, is that actually adequate? Certainly it's necessary, but not sufficient. Those kinds of things, like all the orthodoxies of the world that they encounter that strike them as odd, it doesn't take much for them to see that there's something wrong there. And that includes something like, I would never bring a child into this world. It doesn't take too much to kind of break down that wall or just have a discussion about it. We're not trying to break them down, but just in the sense of having a helpful doubt about the infallibility of that kind of idea.
So they're open and they're listening. And that's interesting. It also struck me when you talked about their interest in the transcendent and their susceptibility to drugs and addiction. Now, do you think perhaps that the two are linked? That from our perspective, oftentimes there's a link between addiction, whether it's to video games or to drugs or gambling or whatever. That this is an attempt. Misguided attempt at really trying to connect with the transcendent, with God. And so perhaps, is there something that we can say to them that will naturally appeal to them because they do have these tendencies and this hunger that they just don't know how to quite correctly identify it? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, and you do see experimentation even on like the proverbial, right, with or openness to like hallucinogenics, the sort of the psychonauts who are now sort of proclaim themselves to be kind of religion adjacent types. But the problem is you can't short circuit spiritual experience. There's no real workaround. It has to be an authentic exercise of who you are as a rational being made in God's image, not having altered your fundamental access to your own rationality. So there's no short circuiting, there's no shortcut, there's no workaround. Although maybe it's in a certain sense understandable. So yeah, I mean, and also one little outgrowth of that would be the danger of syncretism. It's not a huge thing, but I do see it. And I think from a broadly Christian perspective, we would say, look, if you end up getting a spiritual experience from something that alters your mind, that's because you were actually accessing something which is real. And maybe that should scare you a little bit because as a number of people have said, the devil's greatest trick is to make you think he doesn't exist. Good and evil are real, and you don't want to encounter evil in a state where you're very vulnerable. You want to have the armor of God, as we would say.
Fair. Rabbi Webb, thank you so much for those are some great things to grab a hold of. I'll be revisiting this video and some of those answers. There's a lot of material there to work with. Thank you so much. Rabbi Webb, the one thing, of course, you said that immediately grabbed me was this idea. You said, what is in front of you is your work. And this grabs a hold of this idea that Fidelity Month is not, it has some big principles, but in reality, it's a very a local friendly phenomenon, that it's all about what you can do to take charge of your life and to change the circumstances that surround you. There can be a tendency, I guess, to be on some level, you are almost paralyzed by the largeness of some of the problems you see. So this idea of the work in front of you is your work, and to help them focus on that, to me seems like a theme that Fidelity Month really needs to hammer on. And I wonder if you could help us or to examine this a little bit more, the local versus kind of the universal, to how do you think we can best reach Gen Z with this message of change? Like, what types of change, what types of activities and things do you think would appeal to Gen Z?
In the 30th chapter of Deuteronomy, God says to Moses, "Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond your reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us, that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to do it." And there's an argument in the Talmud about what this instruction is. Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you. Which instruction? So the one opinion is the instruction which is immediately prior, in the same chapter, the instruction to believe in the Lord your God, to love him, and to be in awe, and to hold him. But there's another opinion that says this instruction is whatever commandment you're currently engaged in. This instruction is not speaking about the chapter, it's speaking about you and about your life. So when you look at any point in your life, say, what does God want from me here, now? And whatever God wants from me here, whatever God wants from me now, that is this instruction. And at any point, a person can say, "Oh, well, no, that can't be the instruction because that's too hard." Or if it is the instruction, I can't do it. And we are told by God in Deuteronomy that that is not true. That our instruction is not in heaven. Our instruction is not on the other side of the sea. It is here for us as long as we take it. And we can hammer this home, we can push on this, and we can tell people. And what people want more than anything is truth. What people want more than anything is reality. You know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was my personal guide, the leader of the Chabad movement, and who drove the expansion of Chabad to what people see on 900 campuses, sent almost exclusively couples and families to go and establish centers. And the reason that he did that, you know, to your point, Michael, is because people model what they see. And if they see something in their home, like somebody said earlier, if they see a troubled home, they come from a divorced home, and then they come to campus and talk to someone who is a college guidance counselor who may not be married, or who, you know, or just a friend, and say, "How do I get through this?" That's not, it might help them intellectually, but it doesn't help them emotionally. But when they walk into a home, which is a happy home, and they see how a family operates, they see how children work, and they see how people, you know, can navigate agreement and disagreement and whatever normal families navigate, that's more powerful than 1,000 conversations. They come through and say, "Oh, okay, I get it. I can do that." Or, "I want to do that. Would you help me do that? Or do you think I can do that? Or how can I do that?" But the question just shifts naturally. And I think that's what we need to create for them. We need to create the space for them to come in. They don't need laser tag. They don't need, I mean, it's great. Laser tag's fun. It creates friendship, and we should do it. And so do ski trips, and these are great. And we should do all these things. But what they need is to see whatever we believe they should be doing, they need to see us doing it. If they can see us acting ethically, then that's a way for them to do it. And, many years ago, I was officiating at a wedding in Israel. Beautiful, beautiful wedding. And after the ceremony, I was in this farm in northern Israel, and I was walking with this Catholic fellow who went to Princeton. And we're standing on this bridge overlooking this koi pond. And he turns to me and says, "So how do I become a good person?" So I said to him, "How far is it from your apartment to your office?" He works at Morgan Stanley. And they told me, whatever, 10 blocks. So I said, "How many homeless people do you pass on the way?" I don't know, maybe a dozen. I said, "Okay, so take $24 and put it in your pocket. And on the way to work, give $1 to every person. And on the way back, do it again. And do it every day. You have the money, so do it." And he said to me, "Well, what if they're using it for other things? What if they don't need it? What if they don't deserve it?" So I said to him, "You didn't ask me how to become an effective altruist. You asked me how to become a good person. If you want to become an effective person, it's a different conversation. We could talk about that, but that's not the question." And I think that's really, really important. People get so caught up in, will the marriage work? Will the date work? Will the kids work? Will the money come in? There's a lot of wills, and you can there's so many questions that you could end up getting totally paralyzed and confused. And sometimes we have to just move all those questions to the side and say, look, the goal here is to say, God put me here in this world to do good, to reveal him. So let's do good and let's reveal him. And you know what's going to happen if we do that for a little while? Then we can start to triangulate what we do and say, well, now how do we go do it a little more effectively? Or how do we do it in a little bit of a better way? But we have to start by doing. Start by modeling and start by doing.
That's a great reflection. Thank you so much. That ties into, I'm wondering, I'll leave you with this last question for all three panelists. This has been wonderful, by the way. Thank you so much. I am going to go back and watch this again because there's so much. I could not possibly write the notes that I need to. So I'm just trying to soak it in right now. But Gen Z, we know, they spend a lot of time on the internet, on their electronic things that isolate them sometimes from people. They have anxiety, depressions at very high levels. Do you think that these kinds of things, inviting them into social interaction, into community, do you think that, maybe in some way, is this a natural answer or a way that we could reach out to them and invite them in to kind of get them out of that world and into the active world rather than a digital world, maybe solve the problems that they're facing of anxiety and depression? Your thoughts, all of you. Help them at least.
Well, I'll say very briefly, I'm a minimalist in my goals.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think that I'd love to change the world, but when God gave the 10 Commandments, he didn't do it in Greek. And he didn't say, preach love, do good, even turn the other cheek. He didn't even say that. He said, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Honor your father. And separately, your mother. These are very particular points. Highly specific. And to my mind, there's a reason for that. Because we don't change the world in broad strokes. We change the world in tiny little turns of the screw. And that's what we try to do. So I don't know. I think it might be nice in the abstract to go and solve the internet problem, and there are a lot of people spending a lot of money on that. And I think it's a good problem to solve. But if you ask me what my problem is that I am solving, is that when I have a student who walks in and is sitting in front of me, I want to make sure that they see the benefit of joy and the joy that can come with being rooted in faith, rooted in family, and rooted in tradition. And if they see that, that's a lot.
So inviting them into that experience that's what you're trying to do, to model those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this goes to my earlier point about, look, like, yes, church, synagogue, Bible studies, like all these things, would that help their socialization and community building? Sure, like absolutely. As somebody who does like data, Rabbi Webb, like yes, we know, like it's very clear.
I don't dislike data. I just don't spend my life focused on it.
You're like, yes, like hanging out with other humans is good for you for all sorts of things. But one of my colleagues at George Mason University, Nicole Penn, something she's very nervous about is like when we look at these religious revivals, a lot of them are college-age men. And while that's all very exciting at the moment, these are people who have a lot of free time on their hands, don't have major responsibilities of a 9 to 5. Like they have a few hours to kill about whether or not the Council of Chalcedon and if Christ has one nature or two, like they have hours to end on like how many angels on the head of a pin. This raises the issue: is this a momentary thing, or is this actually going to? So to get to your point, Deacon Michael, like yes, like can Fidelity Month and leading people back to these community, like can that help the internet? Like yes, of course, but if you really want to build the foundation, I think you've got to go beyond that. I think that's this in my own anecdotal experience. Like many Gen Zers know that they have an unhealthy relationship with their phone. Like they're aware of this. Doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it, but like being self-aware is kind of like enough. And for many of them, it's like, yeah, I kind of know that the phone has like melted my brain. Like it's so like yes, like would going to an epic high mass with no screens and nothing but like a hymnal and like completely being removed, like would that be good for your soul and your psyche? Yeah, sure. But then again, that I think leads us to something Father so the bad ideas for so long. This is what the new atheists talked about like hacking religion, where they acknowledge like dang it, against our best efforts, study after study shows that religion is good for people. So if we could somehow if we could somehow get rid of the spirit and just have, so like we'll just do mindfulness and that will be enough. Or like, well, we'll just have the golden rule and like that will just be enough. And clearly it's not enough. So to echo to echo the good rabbi, yeah, like in the abstract, this would be good, but I'm playing for keeps. So that's a much harder sell.
Yeah, I'd say, planting the seed of doubt regarding these things, maybe just sort of implanting the idea like maybe, your phone is taking over your life, and can you kind of make that understanding a real thing? Can you actually act on that? Can you give yourself permission to act on that? So many of these things have the category of we would call them temptations. And I'll often talk with people and just say like, well, on the day of a greatest day of your life, your wedding, the birth of your first child, some huge promotion in your life, huge watershed moment, would you be tempted to go out and, let's say, like gamble? Do you want to, hit the slot machines on the day of some incredible, blessing in your life? And the answer, of course, is no. That's what you do on kind of like a sad, rainy day, along with kind of, sitting on your phone all day. That's what you do in a kind of more depressive mood. And so a big part of it is, like Rabbi Webb was saying, realizing the goods of life that actually are already there and have always been there, and realizing that they exist. We have a bunch of families who are always in our building, and one of them works with us, and she brings her 1-year-old in 3 or 4 days a week. Her 1-year-old, has endless babysitting for that reason from all the college students who have just been reminded that babies are actually real people who really exist in the world, and there are none of them on the college campus except for here. And those reminders of the goodness of life are usually going to be the things that take people away from these kind of dopamine hit behaviors that don't get them beyond that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Father Kevin, I want to ask a follow-up that relates to what you said in your original point. Maybe all of you can answer this. It struck me there's an interesting tension here. You mentioned that for Gen Z, I think for me, I've seen this on myself and in my peers, there is a prioritization of the safe, of the comfortable, of the cautious. And yet, of course, what's interesting about so many, and as you said, we don't want to entirely throw that aside, but what's interesting about these principles of fidelity, of faith, of marriage, of family, of community, is that they're not always safe. There's risk there. There's potential for hurt. There's great blessing. As someone who's married, I can tell you it's not always comfortable, but yet it's a wonderful thing. It's a blessing from our Creator. I mean, we've been created to enjoy these things. So I'm curious for all of you, how do we show this next generation that the risk is worth it, the investment is worth it, and that even if there's danger, even if there's risk, it's going to pay off for them?
I think a big part of it is encouragement, and encouragement has to, they can involve giving example, it can involve showing, what the truth is, it can involve real life in whatever sense can be presented to them. But encouragement is a huge, huge thing, in part because these students, these younger folks, they respond to encouragement because they really crave affirmation in many ways. But they need affirmation and encouragement in the ways that society is not giving it to them. So, 50 years ago, you could rely upon any or most public schools, let's say in America, to give you a generally good education that was humane, that would teach you more or less the right answers to questions about wrong and right. It would kind of put you in a good position relating to good conduct and being a good citizen. You can't do that anymore. There's no such trust we can give to the public order to just teach people well. And as a result, a lot of people are just in the natural state of discouragement. They need encouragement. And it's a mix of both practical and theoretical. On the days when they're really having a hard go, that's when it could be good to be reminded, like, oh, I've actually been chosen by God to be with this person in this particular place at this time. No one else on this earth has this particular calling but me, and only I can do it. That's a very powerful realization for people to have, and it gives them a sense of responsibility and even urgency, like I need to actually see this through. Abandoning ship is not an option. And then so reminding them of not just we don't want to call it ideal because we're not idealists, but reminding them of what the truth is about the thing you're doing. The second thing would just be to actually have a body of knowledge that is practical on the part of the whole community. It can never just be one guru. It's got to be the whole community, kind of really crowdsourcing one's wisdom base and seeking out many, many people and their takes on one situation. So as our chaplains, we're constantly a nexus of connecting this person with this person with this person, because this person had this horrible dilemma and exactly the same what this person did. And in many ways, the church can be that kind of because the church has a kind of intimate connection to people in their interior lives without disclosing that to the public. You can connect people who have had similar dilemmas or similar triumphs, and it can be immensely helpful for people to realize, like, the subset of a subset of a subset of a problem that I have. A child with a rare disease, for instance. Maybe there's someone who has a very similar situation. Those kinds of scenarios are always something the church could be very helpful with. But and above all, I think encouragement, because the background theory of society is not giving them encouragement in all the ways they should be. So we need to be the ones who are doing that.
I just want to echo what Father Kevin said. It also, for us, it takes risk on our end. Like something I think we have our own safetyism. Speaking as a college professor and as a pastor, an assistant, um, like we welcome students into my wife and I's home and have dinner with them. Some of my colleagues at my former institute thought that was very strange. Like, why would you want to spend time with students? And so, well, like, and the students see like how my wife and I, like, to your point, modeling things of what, when I got to know students more, I'd ask them like, hey, have you seen any good movies lately? I'm looking for a recommendation. Like, I'm looking for I'm interested in your opinion. So like, it requires risk on our behalf as their elders of sorts, even if we're not that removed, to model good behavior, to engage them as well. We have to also take a risk as well. And it's not just pastors, rabbis, imams, priests, like this is something we could be encouraging to our local communities and congregations. That like, hey guys, like maybe if you see like a random teenager who needs a meal, invite them over for a meal, get to know them. If you see somebody who needs, babysitting help on a Friday night because, husband and wife haven't had a date night in a while, maybe offer to be that service to them, But hey, buddy.
Speaking of.
Perfect for Fidelity Month.
I do want to do justice, and Rabbi Webb, we can hear from you on this too, to a question that was asked us by Roxanne. Dr. Gullotta, you gave a great answer in the chat there. But the question comes, Roxanne says that she has children who are Gen Z. And she says they do have to carve their own paths. But we, as her parents, may have something to offer still. If Fidelity Month is about unity, and it certainly is, fidelity to our family, seeking to be better parents and better children, how can we build that bridge? Do you all have any further thoughts for the parents who are listening?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you, Roxanne. I don't know how old your children are, but at any age, the answer might be the same. Schedule time with them in discrete amounts of time. So if you say to, the 20s, okay. So if you say to your son or to your daughter, do you want to drive with me to the dry cleaners? That if you say that, then you're telling them that we have 7 minutes together, and they get in the car and you can bring up a conversation and they know that there's 7 minutes. That's it. And then the conversation ends. So if it's awkward, it's awkward. If they don't want to talk back, you say, hey, I just want to raise this for you. If you want to talk about it, we can. They have 7 minutes there, they have 7 minutes back, and that's the end of it. Open-ended conversations tend to be very hard, and they create a lot of standoffishness. So I would avoid those mostly. But if you do this once a week, once in 2 weeks, say, if you just put it into your routine that you go for a walk every day, a 5-minute walk, then it gives an excuse to say to your son or to your daughter, do you want to come with me on my Wednesday walk or my Tuesday walk? But if you build these things in, then you build short spurts of time where you can either talk or listen, and you build trust. And when they're ready, they'll share, and when they share, they will share for hours. But and you'll wish you never started it, because they will never stop. They'll say ma, but you can get there. And the truth is that they want it really badly. But it's like anything else, the same way that you got married was by dating slowly, and then again, and then again, and then until you built the trust to actually open up. Your child is a real adult now, with real things going on and real feelings. And you may not have noticed it because they were 4 just a minute ago, but they're not. And so giving them that little bit of respect and allowing them this short spurt of time, there's no guarantees, but most of the time this will open them up.
So there's a really good book by a sociologist, at Notre Dame by Christian Smith about raising children and passing on the faith. And one of the things, again, to Father Kevin's excellent point, one of the things that is most destructive to passing on faith, fidelity to children is hypocrisy. And now, everyone will learn hypocrisy at some point. That's just a part of growing up. They will learn that there are hypocrites out there. But according to Smith's studies, parental hypocrisy when in religious context strikes the hardest, close only to like religious leaders. So, speaking as the father of a young child, it's what if examples in the book, for example, is like, that a father says, I love your mother, and that Jesus doesn't want you to, like, thou shalt not commit adultery with your eyes, and yet the son finds his father's porn collection, like something like as devastating as that. Like, my father is a hypocrite, or that, like, hold on, mom, we just heard a message from the rabbi about charity, and we're ignoring every single homeless person and telling, don't talk to them, keep moving, keep your head. Like, I thought this is not what we were meant to do. Like, hypocrisy, so we have to model to our children the type of people that we are. And the other thing, to just the echo as well of the studies, like, Jonathan Haidt, who's not religious, and all these other clauses, that the Sabbath has value, that, like, get your kids away from the phones, the screens. Like, the only screen that had even remote help is like a family television, where we're only going to watch this one movie as a family, and we're going to talk about it afterwards. So no multiple screens going as well. And you cannot be a hypocrite and check your phone while that movie is going on. Or, you can have freedom, but it can't be this. So there's a fence. Like, you can read whatever novel you want, whatever nonfiction you want. If you want to, like, play a CD and listen to music in your room, that's fine. But we are not doing this. We're doing something else.
I think these are all great. I'm just going to say that I'm a hypocrite in 99% of that. So, but
help me help you, Rabbi.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Certainly on the screens, the focus. No, but I think it's great. I would just say that you can. It's just, I guess, a caution. You can look at what Dr. Gullotta just said and say, oh, well, throw up your hands in despair. It's like, okay, I guess I'm not going to get there. But it's okay to be taking one small step, and to say, and to concede the point, and to say to your child, look, I struggle with the same things you struggle with. It's hard for me to be off my phone, and and it's really helpful to me to zone out when I get nervous or angry or whatever. I go to my phone the same way that other people do, but I'm going to put into my calendar 10 minutes each day that I will actually put down my phone, and I'm going to do it in 10 minutes that you see. Not because I want you to think that I don't do it other times, but because I want you to see that I'm trying. And life is about trying. Life is not only about the success, it's also about the effort. And there too, I think it's okay to take these baby steps and to be open about it.
I think one interesting thing, we always talk about vulnerability today. It's been valorized as kind of like this, kind of like empathy. It's seen as like the universal virtue, when in fact it's kind of more of a derivative virtue. And vulnerability, I think, needs to be taken with a certain moderation. There are certain times when religious leader or person in moral authority can be vulnerable, but other times when you really, really shouldn't be. You're allowed to have a bad day, I suppose, but you can see the shock on people's faces when people who look up to you, they realize, oh my gosh, he's having a not great day today. I can't believe it. It's almost sort of like a appalling sort of, I can't believe he's actually frustrated today by something. Who knows what it is? Could be the boiler, But that, I think, there is an old wisdom to. It's not a stiff upper lip kind of thing. It's not a repression kind of thing. It's not a question of just like pushing your authenticity away. But there is a wisdom in sort of internal versus external. In the church, we'd say forum, the internal forum, the external forum, the inner holiness of your family life. Even when you open it up to students, it's not totally open. That wouldn't be just or fair to you. If it were totally open, you have to have your inner sanctum. That's just your family's space. And every person in every situation has to have that helpful boundary, and in a way that actually is a service to the students of this age, because when you can be a rock of stability, even though you're having a not great day, that is an immense service to them. And I see this even in the extreme cases, like when I'm constantly, going to hospitals and seeing people who are kind of in their last moments of life. And I want to be extremely sad, and I am extraordinarily sad every single time. It doesn't change at all. But I don't, in that moment, sort of see myself as being worthy of partaking in that sadness in exactly the same way that they are, because it's my job to be a different kind of role in that place, and I can, process it a little bit later. And it's always that interesting balance. I think today we talk about vulnerability as like the ultimate way to get through to people, but it actually can be counterproductive if it's not kind of down the middle. There's a principle of moderation, I think, that actually makes the vulnerability more effective.
And thank you, Roxanne. Roxanne says, appreciated these thoughtful answers very much, and we are thankful for you listening. Well, I want to be respectful of our panelists' time, and I'll just ask one more quick question before we conclude. We'll do sort of a lightning round for everyone, and Deacon Michael, you're welcome to answer this as well. What are maybe one or two practical things that those of us who are listening can do to practice fidelity better? We want to, as Rabbi Webb was saying, we want to have manageable goals. Maybe just for this month, what's one thing we can do in our own lives?
I'll go back. Manageable goals sounds like very good. Tipa tipa mitzarefet l'cheshbon gadol. That's what it says in the Talmud. That the sea is made of a multitude of drops that went one on top of the other. And anything good is that way. You don't get anything that just sort of plops down as a finished product. Your adult children started out as toddlers, and before that as babies in diapers. And they slowly learn to walk, they slowly learn to grow. Even in the Bible, you have the story of Moses instructing the spies to go into the land of Israel. And the rabbi's right that surely Moses would never have done something that God did not instruct him to do. And yet, we don't find God instructing Moses to send the spies. And in fact, it says, send for yourselves the spies, which is sort of this half argument. And the rabbis say, why send for yourselves? Because Moses said to God, should I send? And God said, I don't know. If you want to send, do whatever you want. And the rabbis query this and say, wait a minute. If this is how the Talmud is going to understand the story, that Moses asked God if he should send, and God kind of waffled, why would he send them? He's Moses. He should have got the message that, if God's not 100% in, don't send these spies, don't have them come back with the bad report, don't deal with the aftermath, just don't do it. And the answer that the Talmud gives, the answer the rabbis later give, is that, in fact, God was telling Moses something else. And that is that I led you by the hand. I took you to the burning bush. I led you to Pharaoh. I turned your staff into a serpent. I took you out of Egypt. I split the sea for you, and I gave you the law. I did it all. But in order for you to be a leader, you need to make a decision. And when you make a decision, it might be a mistake. But you still got to make it. And when you make the decision, you will need to deal with the consequences of that decision, which may result in chaos and the Jewish people in the desert for 40 years, and you, Moses, dying in the desert. And that's the decision. But you still have to make it. And then you can repent, and you can ask, and you can plead, and you can go back and forth, and that's part of life. And part of growing up is, I reject the word hypocrisy, because I think it's wrong. I think it's humanity. And humanity is filled with problems. In the Catholic faith, they speak of original sin. The Jews reject that. But we recognize that people make mistakes. They're fallible. and that then they go and return and repent and overcome them and then fall again. It's not our words, but these are the words of the Bible itself. In Ecclesiastes, 7 times will the righteous fall and arise. Sorry, Proverbs. And the rabbis say, what is the righteous? The righteous is not the one that falls 7 times. The righteous is the one that rises 7 times. Anyone can fall. But when you fall, what do? Do you pick yourself up and say, all right, I fell. Now let's get up and let's keep going. To say that a person is hypocritical is to say that they are not in control. And to say that a person made errors is to concede that they made mistakes and they're going to try harder. So, hopefully nobody finds porn in their father's closet. I wish them that this never be the case. But if they do, I wish their father the strength to say, you caught me, and I am glad that you were able to go and discover my weak point that I will work on. And hopefully you see me as a person who is a problematic person that struggles and does a lot of good and also struggles. And you will be that way too, in different ways. Hopefully this is not your struggle, but you'll struggle in other ways. You will have problems and you will grow from the problems if you recognize that the problems are things that you can grow from.
Yeah, for the Fidelity Month theme, I just say virtue is its own reward. And we sometimes forget that that's the case. In the early church, for a while, there was a trend of what we call deathbed baptism, where you sort of live the way you wish to live, and then on your deathbed or sometime around there, you hope that it'll work out timing-wise, that you'll get baptized, and then you'll kind of be, home free. The problem with that, among many other things, including the one that you generally don't do about face on your deathbed. That's not really how human psychology works. You tend to want to justify the way you've lived and think of that being good. But that would also presuppose the idea that the path of virtue, the godly life, is not as good. And that's why you want to do as you will and then be holy right before you meet your maker. But the message we always have, sort of a natural law message, is that no, virtue actually is its own reward, and your life will be qualitatively better if you do follow the virtues, follow the commandments. You'll be happier. And if you don't believe us, then try it. We always have to be willing to test what we believe. And I always invite people, just try it. Try for a month to see if this actually works. Because we don't proclaim unfalsifiable truth claims. We're not really in that business. No, our faith is falsifiable. There's a condition on which it could be shown to be false. So by all means, call our bluff. Try it out. See if living the commandments for a month actually really does prove to be its own reward.
I guess speaking personally, you'll be surprised, if not shocked, how easy it is to replace something really stupid and unmeaningful and complete distracting with something that's just even if it's not like a revelation, it's just actually better for you. So I was quite addicted to podcasts for a long time, and a lot of the podcasts, they were fun and they were enjoyable. A lot of it was the same talking points, political speculations, cultural bemoaning, it was the same. I was why am I listening to this? I know what they're gonna say. Oh, isn't Team Blue terrible? Isn't Team Red terrible? This movie wasn't as good as I thought it was. Why? And I was devoting hours of my life, and instead I changed to listen to audiobooks instead. And I'm learning things. I'm being engaged mentally. I'm learning the lives of people I find inspirational, theories that are really interesting, parts of history I knew absolutely. Again, it didn't rock my world, but just something as simple as that was really beneficial. It was for my soul, and I think for my family life as well, just being in a better mood, more attentive. And beyond that, similar to what the rabbi was mentioning before, the getting up, like the best athletes in the world will tell you, and I'm not a specimen of like an athlete, but the best athletes in the world will tell you that like not every time you go to the gym is this like amazing Rocky montage where you're perfectly in sync with your mind and body and it's like epic. Sometimes it's a grind and it sucks and it's not enjoyable to do those reps, to do that set, but it's still good for you. It's still how you stay in shape. It still maintains your physique, et cetera, et cetera. And often, like the little things like that, like telling your wife you love her, telling your kids that like, and they say like, ugh, and they groan and things like that, or just like saying the Lord's Prayer once a day, like whatever your religious tradition will be. Every time we put my son to bed, we say a very simple prayer from the Book of Common Prayer that's only like a paragraph long. And we do it every single night, even when he's screaming and even when he's cuddling, we just do it because it's good for us to do. So yeah, those would be my two pieces of advice. Like you'll be amazed how easy you can replace things that are far more helpful that were distractions, and consistency matters even in the little things.
Deacon Michael, any final words to share with us before we close?
Sure. What you just said, actually, Dr. Gullotta, it made me think of, I don't know if you're a friend of The Lord of the Rings, but it made me, I hope I found the right one here. I'm not guilty of finding a wrong quote, but it's a quote from The Hobbit where he says, "I found that it's the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay, simple acts of kindness and love." And I think, although it's a book by a Christian, but it's still fiction. The sentiment is a very true one. It's just that I guess there can be a tendency, a temptation to think too big, and we're back to that topic again of making it concrete, real. What can I do? What can I not do? And what you're saying is, hey, it doesn't have to be this big thing. If you go to dinner together, you commit together to getting together as family, it's amazing the things that happen at that dinner table. The bonding, the depth of the discussion, the relationships, doing that. I think of on a concrete level, we're going to have the Fidelity Month day of fasting and prayer coming up. If everybody, commits to that, praying for the country, that we come together, we heal it. Even something like I'm wearing right now, a Fidelity Month shirt, whether it's wearing a shirt, putting something on your Facebook profile picture, even all of those things send a very subtle message. Shirts, hats, there are ideas. You can petition your town, right, for Fidelity Month to get the ideas out there. So I think there are a lot of things that people can do, but it starts with just choosing one and actually doing it and follow through. And I think you've all made the case very, very well. And I'm greatly appreciative of everything that you had to offer us today.
Yes, Dr. Gullotta, Rabbi Webb, Father Staley-Joyce, thank you all so much for being here, for your time and for your wisdom. And Deacon Michael, thank you for being a wonderful co-host with fantastic questions. For our discussion, what you said actually goes right into the points I was going to conclude with, which is ways you can be involved in Fidelity Month. The best way to do that is just to go to our website, which is fidelitymonth.com. And there, right at the top, you can see a Start Here button to see some suggestions. Many of those are what Deacon Michael just said. Our logo is a myrtle wreath, which is a classical symbol of fidelity. There are some downloads on our resources tab on the website where you can click the logo and make it your profile picture on social media. Many of us have done that. Deacon Michael has, Professor George has. We'd encourage you to do that to spread awareness. There's merch for sale. There are stickers, yard signs, flags, shirts like Deacon Michael has on right now that you can purchase. Those are at cost, by the way. We're not looking to make money on that. That's just to spread awareness. We don't even have an account to put money in, so that's not something we're concerned with. If you are a member of a civic organization or a school board, or if you're a mayor or city council member, we have model resolutions, modeling after both Congress and then some other bodies, where you can pass a resolution recognizing June as Fidelity Month. We hold this every year. If you're a member of the clergy, if you're a pastor or a rabbi or a priest, we have bulletin inserts designed to talk about Fidelity Month. We're also so thankful that, at least as far as I know, several pastors that we know of are preaching Fidelity Month sermons this month, even whole sermon series. We're really thankful for that. That's one thing you can do. The only other thing I'll mention is that we have two other scheduled so far. We may have more, but two other scheduled events this month. One of them is this coming Monday in Washington, D.C., announcing a Senate resolution on Fidelity Month. We're going to have Professor George there, Senator Josh Hawley, Kristen Wagner of Alliance Defending Freedom, and several others there. That'll be in the Longworth House office building in D.C. on Monday night. You can go to our website to find more information about that. And then we have one other webinar scheduled on the topic of the vibe shift. There's a lot of parallels with this discussion, so hope you'll come back. That one's actually going to be on Twitter as a Twitter space. We're going to try that for the first time. So with hopefully get some more audience participation. And that'll be on the evening of June 17th. We'll have Professor George, Dr. James Wood, Caroline Downey from National Review, and Dan Darling from Southwestern Seminary. And hopefully if you have a Twitter account, you can join and talk too. So we look forward to seeing you all at those two events. Thank you so much for coming. We wish you a happy Fidelity Month, and we hope you have a good night.
God bless.